Good morning to everybody. Joe, another day of blockbuster revelations. They just keep coming from this committee. Among them, how close that mob on January 6th was to Mike Pence as they were chanting outside, "Hang Mike Pence."
And Mike Pence just staying right in there. I will tell you, another week of this, and they're going to get a block of marble, move it a couple of 100 yards from the FDR Memorial, and just start chiseling out, like, Mike Pence's statue with Dan Quayle handing him a copy of the Constitution. Now, it's surreal what's going on, but you stop, actually, and I saw somebody yesterday, I think he writes for the LA Times, talking about how when you realize that Donald Trump, in effect, was trying to cause Mike Pence to be killed or injured in a serious way, swept up by the mob, it's one person came to the conclusion that it was really the worst thing that a sitting president has done in the history of this republic. But think about that for a second, Willie. I mean, Donald Trump knew Mike Pence's life was in danger. He knew that people were trying to get a hold of him, trying to find him. He'd been whipping hatred up against him all day, started with that rally. And then when Mike Pence is chased and he's running around and they're trying to find a safe location for his family and himself, that's when Donald Trump sends a tweet that, as testimony suggested yesterday, just threw more gas on the fire. And boy, Willie, they were close to finding him. And as the testimony suggested yesterday, because the Proud Boys, and I believe the Oath Keepers were some of the first people in there, the threat to Mike Pence's life was real. If they had found him, they likely would have killed him or caused him serious harm, as well as his family. And again, we're so shocked but not surprised by what Donald Trump does, that yesterday was just another day to stop and say a president of the United States was working actively to cause bodily harm or death to the vice president of the United States. That's just, again, it's just never happened before in the history of this country.
Yeah, and I think that's what these hearings are. We feel like we know so much about January 6th. We expect and understand so much about Donald Trump. But these are moments, these hearings, to stop and appreciate in detail with evidence, video, and testimony of how bad that day was and how yesterday the committee said Donald Trump put a target on the back of his vice president. That third day of testimony did focus on Donald Trump's efforts to pressure Mike Pence into overturning the election. The committee presenting evidence that several of Trump's advisors told him the vice president did not have that kind of power, just couldn't do it, and that when Pence did not do what Trump wanted, the president incited his mob of supporters against him. We will start with the committee demonstrating just how close that pro-Trump mob came to finding Mike Pence after the Capitol had been breached.
By 2:24 p.m., the Secret Service had moved Vice President Pence from the Senate chamber to his office across the hall.
The noise from the rioters became audible, at which point we recognized that maybe they had gotten into the building.
Then, President Trump tweeted, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth."
It was clear that it was escalating and escalating quickly. So then when that tweet, the Mike Pence tweet, was sent out, I remember us saying that that was the last thing that needed to be tweeted at that moment. The situation was already bad, and so it felt like he was pouring gasoline on the fire by tweeting that.
30 seconds later, rioters already inside the Capitol opened the East Rotunda door just down the hall. And just 30 seconds after that, rioters breached the crypt, one floor below the vice president.
The Secret Service couldn't control the situation and do their job of keeping him safe.
At 2:26 p.m., Secret Service rushed Vice President Pence down the stairs.
I think they've been trying to figure out whether they had a clear route to get us to wherever it was that they wanted to move us to.
We moved pretty quickly down the stairs and through various hallways and tunnels to the secure location. Upon arriving there was further discussion as to whether or not we were going to leave the Capitol complex or stay where we were.
Vice President Pence and his team ultimately were led to a secure location where they stayed for the next 4.5 hours, barely missing rioters a few feet away.
Make no mistake about the fact that the Vice President's life was in danger. A recent court filing by the Department of Justice explains that a confidential informant from the Proud Boys told the FBI that the Proud Boys would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance. This witness, whom the FBI affidavit refers to as W1, stated that other members of the group talked about things they did that day, and they said that anyone they got their hands on, they would have killed, including Nancy Pelosi. W1 further stated that members of the Proud Boys said that they would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance.
So, Joe, a couple things. Obviously, the vice president could have left the building quickly. That probably was the prudent thing to do, but he insisted they stay and certify the election. The other thing is this Hang Mike Pence chant and the gallows that were put up outside the Capitol. They've been sort of dismissed as, oh, those were symbolic. Those were just chants by some people. But now you hear the evidence inside that hearing and you go, oh, no, actually, these people were looking for Mike Pence. They were looking for Nancy Pelosi, and God knows what they planned to do when they found him.
Well, they wanted to, we have testimony, they wanted to kill Mike Pence. They would have killed Mike Pence. They were searching for Nancy Pelosi. They wanted to decapitate the United States constitutional government. That's why when you have Republican senators and Republican House members trying to push this information away from the American people, they're actually, they're trying to brush aside a coup against the United States of America. And Rev, when you look at all this evidence, you see just how serious it was. And you also see the very clear intent. These people were trying to decapitate our constitutional government, kill the number 2 highest ranking constitutional officer in the land, kill the number 3 highest ranking constitutional officer in the land, and basically leave Donald Trump to be able to do whatever he wants to do, to recertify an election, to be a tyrant who actually doesn't have to leave office when the American voters vote him out.